This dark mode toggle is a designer's dream and a developer's nightmare. It's so pleasing to look at, but every developer says it's impossible. Well, it was impossible until now, and I'll show you how I made it. As usual, I'll be breaking it down as much as possible and building it piece by piece. So we have two states, daytime and nighttime. In the daytime, we have the sun and 4 clouds, and in the nighttime, we obviously have the moon and some stars. I'll set up my foundation by creating one frame div with a container div inside of it. The container div will hold all of our elements, and a frame div will be the very subtle border gradient we can see in this Figma. I'll set a temporary background color for the divs so they're visible, and then I'll set the height and width of the container to the values from the Figma mockup, and I'll make the frame 2 pixels wider and 2 pixels taller, so we get a 1 pixel thick border. I'll set the height of the body element to 100% of the viewport height and set the margin to 0 so I can center the container using the flexbox method. I'll also center the container in the frame so we actually have a 1 pixel thick border, and I'll set the border radius for both to match the Figma. This is a good starting point, and I can now begin on the specifics for the sun. I'll add a button div which will contain our celestial bodies, and I'll add child elements for the sun and the moon. I'll set some shared styling, starting with the width, height, and border radius, and I'll add the background color and box shadow for the sun. Add an attribute to the button which will tell us which state is active, and I'll use the CSS attribute selector with a new attribute to set the sun styling, the page background color, and the container background color. I'll also add an inset box shadow to the container to give it that gradient. The frame will also use a linear gradient as the background since we don't want a solid border. And since the border color will change in each state, I'll set the color in a variable when the sun is active. I'll begin to add the clouds in. I'll set the shared cloud styles to the sizing and rotate them just slightly, and I'll set the container to relative positioning so I can position each cloud relative to it. 2 of the clouds in the back need to be slightly transparent, so I'll set their opacity as well. I'll also add some styles to the container to center the button and also hide any overflow. I'll manually set the moon to active, and I'll set the cloud position so they move out of the way when we transition to night. I'll begin styling the moon by setting the background colors for the container, the frame, and the page. And now we obviously don't have the sun at night, so I'll set the default opacity of the sun and moon to 0 and only set it to 1 when their respective states are active. Adding the transition property gives us a smooth transition. Now I'll add the background color for the moon and a box shadow. We need to push the moon to the right side, and to do so, I'll first set position absolute on both the moon and the sun when they're active, and then set the left value of the button when the moon is active. To make the moon a crescent, I'll add an after pseudo element, round it off, and size and position it till it's in the right spot. For the stars, I'll add an after pseudo element to the container and set the background image to the stars. Set it to absolute positioning and set the background property so it doesn't repeat and is on the center left. This is a dark mode toggle, so it needs to actually function as a button. And to do that, I'll add some simple JavaScript that just switches the data active class in the button between sun and moon. And now to smooth the transitions, I'll add some CSS, mainly transition properties and setting some starting states, but I won't bore you with all of that. I'll also add this frame color start property instead of the variable so the linear gradients can transition smoothly. And there we go. We just made the impossible possible. And that's all. Subscribe for more.